So hello everyone, welcome. My name is Vanessa Talley. I am a licensed clinical social worker, scholar, and the founder of Black Feminist Social Work. Here we will explore theory, education, research, and practice through the lens of Black feminist thought. I am so grateful that you are here because this conversation has been years in the making. Black feminist social work has emerged from my work as a clinician, educator, doctoral student, and researcher. But more importantly, from a question that continued to stay with me throughout my professional journey. As I studied social work theories and applied them in practice, I began to wonder whether our profession had fully recognized all of the knowledge available to us. I found myself asking not only what social work teaches, but whose knowledge has shaped what we teach and what we learn. Today marks the beginning of a series exploring that question together. So I'd like to begin with the question that became the foundation for this work. What would social work become if Black women's knowledge, lived experiences, and leadership were recognized as essential sources of theory, education, research, and practice rather than peripheral to them? Take a moment to sit with that question. Notice that I am not asking whether Black women have contributed to social work. History clearly demonstrates that they have. Instead, I'm asking whether those contributions have been fully integrated in the way we produce knowledge, educate future practitioners, conduct research, and understand effective practice. That distinction matters. Social work is a profession rooted in values of dignity, social justice, service, and the importance of human relationships. Those commitments are central to who we are. At the same time, every profession develops through particular histories. The theories we learn, the frameworks we teach, and the research we prioritize all reflect decisions about whose knowledge becomes foundational. Black feminist social work begins from the premise that Black women's ways of knowing have often informed practice while remaining under-recognized as sources of theory and knowledge production. This conversation is not about diminishing existing theories. It's about asking how our profession becomes stronger when we intentionally expand what counts as foundational knowledge. So what is Black feminist social work? I define it as an emerging social work framework and praxis that centers Black feminist thought and Black women's lived experiences as essential sources of knowledge for advancing social work theory, education, research, policy, leadership, and practice. There are two words I'd like to emphasize. The first is centers. Centering does not mean excluding others. It means intentionally recognizing knowledge that has too often existed at the margins. The second word is essential. Essential means that this knowledge is not optional or supplemental. It contributes something necessary to the profession. Whenever a new framework emerges, it's helpful to clarify what it is not. Black feminist social work is not an attempt to replace traditional social work. It is not anti-men. It is not only for Black women. It is not about creating division within the profession. Instead, it invites all social workers into a broader understanding of knowledge, culture, power, healing, and justice. The goal is expansion, not exclusion. As I progressed through practice and doctoral study, I noticed that many theories offered valuable insights, but there remained questions they did not fully answer. How do we understand resilience that develops alongside systemic oppression is one? And how do we account for historical memory, collective care, intergenerational wisdom, and community knowledge? As well as how do we understand healing beyond pathology? Black feminist social work developed in response to those questions. It seeks to expand, not replace, our understanding of effective social work. This framework rests upon four interconnected domains. Theory asks how we understand people and society. Education asks what future social workers should learn. Research asks whose questions are being investigated and whose knowledge is considered credible. In practice, it asks how all of this translates into ethical, culturally responsive care. These four domains continually shape one another. One way to remember Black feminist social work is through what I call the 4 C's. So centering means intentionally recognizing Black women's knowledge. Contextualizing means understanding individuals within their historical, cultural, structural, and relational environments. Co-creating reflects the belief that knowledge develops through collaboration rather than hierarchy. And changing reminds us that social work is not only about understanding the world, it is also about transforming it. I often describe Black feminist social work as both a framework and a praxis. A framework helps us organize ideas and interpret complex realities. Praxis, on the other hand, moves beyond understanding. It connects reflection, knowledge, and action. In other words, Black feminist social work is intended to influence not only how we think, but also how we teach, research, advocate, and practice. No framework develops in isolation. Black feminist social work draws from Black feminist thought, social work scholarship, intersectionality, trauma science, community knowledge, and histories of resistance and liberation. Rather than prioritizing one source above all others, it recognizes that meaningful understanding often emerges through dialogue among multiple forms of knowledge. This is how I envision it all. Now, I'd like to introduce what I consider the visual heart of Black feminist social work. This baobab tree represents how the framework understands knowledge, growth, and transformation. I chose the baobab intentionally. Throughout many African cultures, the baobab is also considered or called the tree of life. It symbolizes wisdom, resilience, community, memory, and survival. Its enormous root system reminds us that what sustains life is often unseen. That symbolism closely reflects the vision of Black feminist social work. So let's begin with the roots. The roots represent the bodies of knowledge that nourish and inform this framework. They include Black feminist thought, which provides a rich tradition of scholarship, theory, and activism that's centered on Black women's lives. Intersectionality, it helps us understand how systems of power interact and shape lived experiences. Community knowledge reminds us that knowledge is not produced only within universities, but also in families, neighborhoods, elders, organizers, and communities. They all contribute wisdom that deserves recognition. Historical context grounds us in understanding that Present experiences cannot be separated from history. Trauma science contributes knowledge about the nervous system, resilience, healing, and the effects of adversity across generations. Liberatory traditions remind us that Black communities have always developed practices of resistance, hope, spirituality, creativity, and collective care. And finally, social work provides the profession's ethical foundation: commitment to human dignity, social justice, and service. Together, these roots nourish the framework. As we move upward, we reach the trunk. The trunk represents Black feminist social work itself. Notice that the trunk doesn't replace the roots. Instead, it brings them together into one coherent framework. The trunk gives strength, structure, and direction. It is where these different sources of knowledge become integrated into a way of teaching, thinking, researching, and practicing social work. Then we move into the branches. These branches represent where the framework extends into the profession. Theory asks how we understand people, relationships, systems, and social problems. Education shapes how future social workers learn and whose scholarship they study. Research influences the questions we ask, the methods we choose, and whose knowledge is considered credible. Practice reflects how we provide culturally responsive, ethical, and liberatory care. Leadership emphasizes Black women's leadership in shaping organizations, institutions, and the profession itself. Policy reminds us that meaningful change requires transforming systems, not only helping individuals navigate them. Community recognizes that lasting social change happens through authentic partnership and shared knowledge within the communities we serve. And finally, if we think about any healthy tree, it doesn't exist simply to grow. It bears fruit. That fruit is, to me, Black feminist social work, what we ultimately hope to cultivate. Expanded knowledge, more equitable systems, holistic well-being, liberatory practice, intergenerational healing, thriving communities. And for me, this image captures the central idea of Black feminist social work. When our roots are deep, our knowledge is grounded. When our trunk is strong, our framework has integrity. When our branches continue to grow, the profession expands. And when our work bears fruit, communities benefit. This is the vision of Black feminist social work. So why does any of this matter? Because the frameworks we use influence the questions we ask. They shape the research we conduct. They influence the interventions we develop. They affect how we teach future practitioners. Ultimately, they influence the experiences of the communities we serve. Expanding our frameworks has real consequences for social work, education, practice, leadership, policy, and research. Although this framework centers Black women's knowledge, its potential benefits extend much further. Students gain broader ways of understanding practice. Educators gain additional perspectives for teaching. Researchers gain new questions worth investigating. Practitioners gain expanded tools for culturally responsive care. And organizations gain opportunities to strengthen equity and inclusion. When our profession learns from a wider range of knowledge, everyone benefits. So I'd like to leave you with two questions. Whose knowledge shaped the theories you learned, and whose knowledge may still be missing? These aren't questions designed to produce guilt or defensiveness. They're invitations to curiosity. Curiosity is often where meaningful scholarship begins. In the coming episodes, we'll continue building this foundation together. We'll explore Black feminist epistemology, the 4 C's in greater depth, the distinction between frameworks and theories, applications in practice, and implications for education and research. Each episode builds on the previous one, creating a comprehensive introduction to Black feminist social work. I want to thank you all for joining me for this first conversation. Black feminist social work is an evolving scholarly framework. Like all meaningful scholarship, it will continue to develop through dialogue, inquiry, research, and collaboration. I hope that today's discussion encourages you to think differently about knowledge, about social work, and about the possibilities that emerge when we intentionally center voices that have too often remained at the margins. If this conversation resonated with you, I invite you to continue learning with me throughout this series. Until next time, keep asking thoughtful questions, remain open to new ways of knowing, and remember that expanding our understanding ultimately strengthens our profession.